starting from. Okay, Be'ez Hashem. Today's daf is Masechta Zevachim Daf Tzadik Dalid. Today's daf is Daf Tzadik Dalid. Hi, Lewis. We're just beginning, and we're going to begin from the Mishnah on Daf Tzadik Gimel Amud Beis. So basically, we are discussing that strange mitzvah. The mitzvah is that if the blood of a korban chatas, a kosher korban chatas, and it's kosher blood that gets onto any item of clothing. I'm using the example, the common example, it would get onto the clothing of the kohen. But if it gets on any item of clothing, the Chumash says, hi, Alan, we just began. So the Chumash says the strange mitzvah that Asher Yiza Midama al Habeget Chabes b'Makom Kodosh, that if blood only of a korban chatas, not of a korban oila, not of a korban shlamim, if it gets onto any item of clothing, you have to wash it in the Beis Hamikdash. And we learned that it has to be kosher blood. It can't be non-kosher, disqualified blood for a chatas. So it's unique by a chatas, this idea of washing clothing. So the Mishnah says, "Nitaz al ho'or," if the and Tzadik Gimel Amud Beis, "Nitaz al ho'or," if the blood fell on a piece of leather and of the skin of the animal. Let's say you're shechting a female sheep, female goat for your korban chatas, and the blood of the korban chatas, kosher blood that was ready to be spilled on the mizbeach, fell back onto the skin of the animal, the hide of the animal. Until you removed it from the body of the animal, so it's not makabel tumah. So this hide, this or, if you didn't skin it off the animal, ein toin kibbutz, then you don't have a chiyuv to do wash the hide, because the only time you need to wash hides is if the only time you need to wash blood is if it landed on a item of clothing. Mishahufshat, but once you skinned off the animal, even if you didn't think about what you're going to do with this piece of leather, but it's so easy to say, "Oh, I'm going to use it as a cover for my a cover in my bed." So once you skinned off the animal and the blood falls on it, Toin Kibbutz, you have to wash the skins. You have to wash the leather. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, so says Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Lazar says not so fast. Af mishahuv, even when it was removed from the animal, eina toin kibbutz, it doesn't need washing. Elam eina toin kibbutz, it doesn't need washing, because af mishahuv, it means even after you take it off the animal, as long as you didn't establish it as to be used as a item of usable item, using it as a cover, as long as you didn't establish it in your mind, so its only potential could be makabel tumah, but it's not makabel tumah yet, and therefore, according to Rabbi Lazar, it wouldn't need kibbutz. You don't need washing off the blood. Now, when it falls on an item of clothing, eina toin kibbutz, you don't have to wash it. Elamokem hadam, only the exact location where the blood fell, not the whole clothing. V'davashu ra'u lekabel tuma, and again, it could be an item of clothing that could potentially be mekabel tuma, even though it's not yet mekabel tuma, and this aligns itself with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. V'ra'u lekibus, and it has to be something that you could wash with. You could wash it. Let's say if it falls on a metal, cup, so then you don't have to wash the metal cup. You could just scrape off the blood. Echad habeged, whether it's a clothing, the echad a sack, the echad or a piece of leather. To unin kibus, you have to do the washing. V'hakibus, the washing of the blood, b'makom kodesh, has to be in a holy place. It has to be in the Beis Hamikdash. Ushviras klicheres, when you cooked let's say chatas in a klicheres, an earthenware keli, so the blood was absorbed in the walls. So the Torah tells you have to break that klicheres b'makom kodesh. You break that klicheres in the Beis Hamikdash. Umurika ushtifa, and scouring and rinsing b'chlina choishes b'makom kodesh has to also be done in the Beis Hamikdash. So again, that's what the psukim say. You got to look at Parshas Tzav. The Torah tells you if the blood goes on a clothing, you have to wash it b'makom kodesh, and then it says the klicheres that you're cooking with the korban chatas, you break it, And if it's a copper keli, busholo, moirek b'shutav b'mayim, you have to scour it and rinse it in water. That's the din. So this is the more stringency of a carbon chatas over regular kachim. That's an oila. That an oila blood falling on clothing, you don't have to wash it. But the chatas, it says you have to wash it off. Says the Gemara, how do I know other besides a beged? Let's say, how do you know if it's a piece of leather? You have to wash it. The Tanrabanim, beged, eliela beged. The pirate sells you only clothing. How do I know to include leather when you skinned it off the animal? That if you have to do kibus, washing. Torah says anything spilling on it, you should wash. So it includes even a piece of leather. Obviously, a leather that's used as for a purpose. Yochol ashari marba or sha'achlo yivshed. Let's say, would I include leather hide that wasn't skinned off the animal? That if blood falls there, you have to do kibus. Talmud Bavli Beged, it has to be clothing. Ma beged haroi lekabel tuma, it could potentially become tuma. I've called haroi lekabel tuma. So any item of leather that could potentially be kabel tuma, with just by thinking about what you're going to do with this piece of leather. Div Rabbi Yehuda. So you don't need to do any work with it, but you're thinking about what to do with it. So since it's just a thought, you're missing just a thought, it's enough to be considered that it's chayev, it's obligated in kibus. Rabbi Lazar Oimem, no, you need more than that. You have to actually be mekabel tumah. Beged eliyah beged. Benayil Rabbi Sak. We go to Amiral. V'chol minim begodim Talmud loy ma'asher leha techabes. Yochashani marba or mishu hofshat. Here he says, I'm going to include or when you skinned it off. Talmud loy beged. Ma beged dovar hamakabel tumah. A beged is something that actually is mekabel tumah. Af kol dovar hamakabel tumah. It's only something that's actually mekabel tumah. So that's the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar requires that not only is it has to be to such a level that it's what it's used for. The piece of leather is used for a cover in your bed. So therefore, it's makabel tuma, then it's required to kibus. But if it's not up to that step, that it could actually be makabel tuma, so then it's not going to require kibus. So the Gemara says, "My benayu." What would be a difference in let's say, what are they arguing about? Rashi explains, where do we find that's an item of clothing, beged, that could be mekabel tuma, but it's not mekabel tuma. So Omar, because they learn it from the word beged. So Omar Abaya, there is such a thing. It's not just by leather. You could even have it by a beged. Matlis, if you have a piece of material, pchusa mishalosh, that's less than the 3 etzbos, I think less than three etzbos. So ikabenaya, that's the difference. A small piece of material. Manda amar ra'ui, one that says ra'ui. So then honami ra'ui, that's also called a beged, because you could decide with the iboya chashav. If you think about it, you say, okay, I'm going to use this small piece of material to patch up a hole in my pants. So then it could become part of a pants. So therefore, it would require a kibus. Right now, it didn't be mekabel tuma. It didn't attach it to the pants. So therefore, it needs. It would actually. He would say that according to Rabbi Lazar, it would not require kibus. Rava gives you another example. Beged shechishav alei l'tzura. Let's say you have a beged, a clothing, that you're going to add designs onto it. So right now, you consider that you plan to do another malacha, ikabenayel. So honami ra'oi. This is also something that could potentially be kabel tumah, because if you want nevata le'machshavti, you could say, oh, I'm not going to put designs on it, and now it's a regular shirt. So therefore, it could be mekabel tuma. It could be mekabel tuma. So since it's just a thought process to make it into something that could be mekabel tuma, Therefore, it would require kibus. Right now, it's not actually being mikabel tuma, and therefore, according to Rabbi Loza, it wouldn't require kibus. Ravina Amar, this is supposed to say Ravina, says, it's for the choshev alayla katzazo ikabenai. Take a piece of carpet that you said you're going to cut it a little, cut it down a little bit. Manda Amar ro'ui honami ru'id, because you could, it's also considered ru'uya, because you could decide, yeah, maybe I'm not going to cut it down. So then you're going to, it's done. It wouldn't be Mekabel Tuma until you actually cut it down, or actually start putting it down as a usable without cutting it down. For Tanya, as we learned, a carpet that you're going to cut it down. Tahira said it's still considered tahar and not considered a carpet that's mekabel tuma until you actually cut it to size. So the bottom line is what we learned in the Mishnah, and the Gemara brought sources that there's a major machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Loza in an item of clothing that requires kibus when blood falls on it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, even if the clothing itself, even if the item is not yet something that's makabel tumo, but potentially if you decide what you want to do with this little piece of cloth or this piece of leather, it could be makabel tumo. So that's enough to require it kibus, even if it's not yet in the stage of being makabel tumo. But Rabbi Loza requires it has to be actually in the stage of being makabel tumo. It's actually something that you established what it's going to be used for. Ein toin kibus. We don't have to wash the whole clothing. You just wash the blood. Mili. The Torah the Rabbanan rabbis taught yochanitas al mikzas begi kol begi toin kibus. I would think that if it fell on the entire on a little piece of the clothing, the entire beged needs to be washed. Talmud loyma asha yazeh lo yamarti lecho el mokam damabad. Where it was spilled on, that's where you have to wash it, the place of where the blood is, but you don't have to wash the entire beged. Because sometimes in kibbutz, like the Nega, you have to wash the entire place, or by kashering, you have to kasher the entire keli. You don't say, oh, the trephis went on this side of the wall. No, you have to do the whole thing. But this din of blood, all you need to do is wash that part where the blood fell, and the rest of the clothing you don't have to wash. Davi Shiroi Lekabatuma, stomach Rabbi Yehuda. Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda. Where we are excluding a keli, a vessel. You don't wash a vessel like a launder a vessel. What you do is the bagridahi. You could scrape off the blood. You don't have to wash it down. If you could scrape it off with a brush or something like that, that's fine. Washing is only by clothing, but it's interesting that I could hear how the Torah can tell you to wash a suit or wash the beged of the kohen. It's made out of material that you wash. But the Mishnah says that even if it was made out of leather, you have to send it through the washing machine. So that's a very questionable. So the Gemara doesn't understand that. Where lememra do you want to say lememra? So you're reading the Mishnah, the or bar kibusu. That leather is something that you could send through the washing machine, right? It's considered rabinu. I'll ask you a contradiction. Hoisa olive lishleshes mekancha besmarted. Hoisa shalar nice lemayim acha tichla. There's an isser in the Torah, of course, not allowed to do washing, laundering on Shabbos. So the Mishnah says that if you have this, if it was on this pillow, so then let's say you have spit on a pillow, so then you can't throw water on the pillow on Shabbos because that's laundering the pillow. So what do you do? As you can see in the picture, he's just wiping it down with a shmata. However, if the pillow was made out of leather, you could actually pour water on it. You see in the picture, he's pouring water on a leather pillow. So you see, and he's not over the avera of doing laundry on Shabbos. So we see wash that leather, there's no such a thing of laundering leather. So how does our Mishnah say that if blood falls on a piece of leather, the blood falling on the piece of leather, you have a chiyuv to put it into launder it. Omar Abai says, "Lo kash, it's not a difficulty." Or Rabbanan or Achem. There's a machlokes whether you launder leather or not. The Tanya we learned to the Brisa, Habeged Vasach, Mekapsoi, Aklivo, or Megaroi. Here's a Brisa that says that the Tanakama holds leather. If blood falls on the leather, you scrape it off. You don't send it to you don't, launder it. But others say, Habeged Vasach, or Mekapsoi. By leather, you actually launder it. V'hakli, only if it's a metal keli, let's say, megarai, you scrape it off. Fine. That's a biased teretz. So, Kaman Ozlo Hoda Omar Rabchi Barashi. Rabchi Barashi said, Zimnim Sagim, he said a very interesting thing. Many times, Havakiimne Kamei de Rav. We were in front of Rav, and it was Shabbos. Now, Shabbos, you're not allowed to do laundry. What did he do? He would throw water onto his shoes. Well, who did Rav Paskin like? He obviously Paskin Kaman Karaboni, Paskin like the Rabbanim, who say that leather is something that there's no such a thing of kibus with leather. And that's why the Chachamim said, when it comes to the blood, you scrape it off. So therefore, since there's no such thing of laundering leather, he allowed them to pour water on his shoes when it got dirty on Shabbos. Amar Rava, so Rava said, is there an opinion that says that leather is not something that can be laundered? There's a pasuk in Chumash that says you launder begadim. Vaksiv, the pasuk says, any leather item that you launder. So we see that leather is something that you launder in the Chumash. So how do you resolve all this? Ela Rava said, Kro masnisim barakim. Our Mishnah is talking about soft leather. Soft leather is something that could be laundered. And so what is the machloikis between the Acherim and the Tanakama? Ki piligi bekosher. They're arguing by hard leather. And hard leather, is it something that could be washed or laundered or not? Tanakama says no, and Rabbi Acherim say yes. Rav, and Rav says, Rav had these shoes that he would pour water on Shabbos to clean it off. Rav was talking about the caution. Rav had a shoe made of hard leather, and he held like Rabbanan that even hard that hard leather is something that cannot be laundered. It's only soft leather that could be laundered, but not hard leather. That's what Rava said, and that's how he put everything together of this puzzle. Hada Amar Rava, then it says Rava regretted it and says Lav Milsihi. I didn't say it correctly. The Amri Neki Nemele Krod Ksivi Barakan Ksivi. When the Miyeloya Skinam Bechli Askelagia Habam Dinasiyam Bekamara Bachmana Diboya Kibus. Rava still regretted it because the pasuk says by nega kli ho'ar ashet chabes, a leather item that you launder, and the pasuk could also be talking about even something made of hard leather, some type of item kosher leather that's let's say a wallet or something that comes from Medina Siyam. If you have a nega there. And the Torah tells you that even if it's made of such hard leather, you should wash it. So we see that even hard leather, you could be laundered. So how do you resolve all this? Answers the Gemara, Ela Amarava, Tzuras, keeping the Megufay Koparcha, Mechalei Mashrei Rach. The answer is that the Pasuk by Nega is talking about hard leather. But the reason why the Torah says it's something that could be laundered, because as soon as it has a Nega, the leprosy on this leather turns it into soft leather, and therefore that leather could be laundered. But real hard leather cannot be laundered, according to the Rabbanim. Amar Rava then said, Ikashli, if I have a question on this whole cheshbon, Hakashli, this is my question. We go to Amid Beis. Karim v'kasin the rakininhu, Karim, that leather covers or leather pillows, right? That you make it from soft leather. Utnan, and we say that presumably this picture of a soft leather pillow, it's actually made of soft leather, and nevertheless you pour water on it if it got dirty on Shabbos. So how could you do that? You just told me that soft leather could be laundered, and if you pour water on something on leather, isn't that called laundering on Shabbos? How are you allowed to do that? Ella Amar Rava, Rava is going to say like this, and here's the final answer. Kol kibus, the lesle kiskus, loishme kibus. On a leather item, just throwing water on it, that's not called laundering. You have to be able to, rub it together. And as long as you don't rub it together, like he's just in this picture, the man is just pouring water on the leather pillow. So that's permitted on Shabbos because he's not rubbing it down. Now, v'had Amar Rab Chia Bar Ashi Zimnam Sagina have a kimini kami derav v'shachshishule mesane b'maya, and Chia Bar Ashi said that I was often by Rav, and he poured water on his clothing. The reason why it was permitted, because even if Rav had soft leather, let's say you had a soft leather shoe, but shitzusen, he was just pouring water onto this bakibas law. He wasn't rubbing it together. He wasn't doing kiskus. This should say have a kiskus law. He wasn't doing kiskus, and he wasn't rubbing it down. So therefore, if Barak and if Rav had soft shoes, everybody holds that way. Caution, if he had hard leather, he could have even scraped it together. But the reason why he didn't scrape it together, because he held like a cherem that you have to be chayshish that there is even kibus by hard leather. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, then any time, why is it if it was made out of leather, I could pour water on it? Even if it was made out of cotton, why can't I pour water on it? So here the Gemara answers the answer. Ihachi beged nami, beged shriyosi zeh kibosi. A beged, any cotton, let's say if it was made out of linen, let's say a linen pillow, when you pour water on it, that's the washing. Because it's such soft material, just throwing it into the water, that's a ready washing. By leather, in order to make it a launder, you have to actually rub it down. Rava l'tamei. So that's the difference. Again, I guess maybe that's why we don't go swimming on Shabbos, because as soon as you enter the water with your bathing suit, even if you're not rubbing it, it's laundering your bathing suit on Shabbos. But if it's a leather item, the Gemara just said that in order to launder a leather item, you have to actually dip it in water and then rub it down. Rava l'tamei. The Amar Rava said, Zarak suda l'mayim chayim. If you throw just a handkerchief into the water, you're liable for laundering on Shabbos. Then Rava said another thing. Zorak pishtan l'mayim. If you throw flax into water, chayiv. Now, what do you chayiv if you throw a seed of flax into water? So bishlama suda, if you throw a handkerchief into water of a kibus, you're washing the handkerchief. Elazera pishtan maitama. What's wrong with throwing a seed flax into water? Because it's growing. Now the seed is sprouting. Then you shouldn't throw wheat and barley into water. Answers the Gemara, Hanach isle riri. The seeds of a pishtan have like mucus coming out of it. And therefore, when you throw seeds of flax into water, they clump together, and that's like making like a dough, so to speak. It's like lisha on Shabbos. Ihachi, if so, shlochim nami. Doesn't any leather also have like a mucus moisture coming out of it that when you throw it together? Answers the Gemara, Hasam kavod lisha. By the flax seeds, when you pour it into the water, it clumps together like a dough. When you pour a bunch of pieces of leather, even though they all have riri, a certain moisture on it, it will not clump together even if you pour it into the water. So now the Gemara just concludes, just one more minute. Darash Rava had a speech. Mutar lechabes minol b'Shabbos. You're allowed to throw water on your shoes on Shabbos. Amalei Papa Rava. Rava gave the impression in his speech that you're allowed to throw the shoes into the laundry machine on Shabbos and rub them down. So Amalei Rav Papa l'Rava v'Amar Chiba Rashi Zim Nesakim Rav Kimin Kamei Durav Shchich Leim Mishana B'Mayim. Rav used to pour water on his shoes on Shabbos, but Shich said he would only pour Aval Kibus Loy. He wouldn't do rubbing it down. And you gave a speech now and said to people that they're allowed to even rub their shoes on Shabbos after pouring water on the shoes. Then Rava said, got another speech and said, he got up and made an announcement. I made a mistake. This is the right way to do it. You're allowed to pour water on your shoes. Kibus asar, kiskus asar, but rubbing the shoes, that's asar, because it's made of leather. So the Mishnah will just finish off another minute. Hakibus b'malkum kodesh. You have to wash do the laundry in the base of Migdash. Mnohali mili the Torah baron tchabes b'malkum kodesh. Shviyas kili cheres m'nayim tam loy mechli cheres v'shaboy shaveh. Rika shtiv mechli cheres m'nayim tam loy mechli cheres v'shal marek v'shuta b'mayim. So look in the psukim, and we'll say that just like you have to launder the beged that had the blood of chatas in the base of Migdash, you break the klicheres is that you cook the carbon chatas in it in the base of Migdash, and if you're kashering the copper kalim, it has to be done in the base of Migdash. And then we finally concluded the Mishnah zechoyme b'chatas. V'su leika, isn't chatas more stringent than carbon oil in other matters? You can't bring the carbon chatas blood into the sanctuary, and it will become chatas blood gets into the base, sometimes is brought into the sanctuary. And to the Gemara b'chatas chitzoina, with our Mishnah is talking about the outer chatas. If that goes into the sanctuary, it's possible. Wait a second. Our Mishnah, it goes according to Rabbi Kiva that any blood that goes into the sanctuary is possible. So our chatas that we're referring to in the Mishnah is a chatas chitzoina. Says the Gemara, but the chatas has more stringencies than an oiler. Shekei mechaper malchayave krisis. Answers the Gemara, b'chatas shminas kol. It's bringing forgiveness on a chayav krisis. The Gemara says that our Mishnah is talking about a carbon chatas for saying an oath. There is no krisis. But shekein tuuna abar matanis. Every chatas you have to sprinkle it on the four corners. Answers the Gemara, Karab Shmuel, the Amakol Damatun Dalmatas the Dalmatanas, Kronis. Ul Tamech. So the Gemara says, wait a second, you're telling me that the only difference between a carbon chatas and a carbon oila is that the chatas blood needs kavisa and not the oila blood. But the ha'ika, there are other things where chatas is more stricter than regular kachim. Ha'ika keren, it has to be poured on the corner. Ha'ika be'etzba, it has to be done with your finger. Ha'ika chuda, it has to be done with on the corner, along the edge, like you see what the kohen is doing over here. So chatas, what are you telling me that chatas? Makes chatas much more stricter than every karchish kachim. So why does the Mishnah say this is the only way a chatas is more stricter than a kodesh and a kachim? Answers the Gemara. It just listed one, but yes, there are many differences between a chatas and a regular kodesh kachim, whereby chatas has more rules to it than, so to speak, a carbon oila. Okay, we'll stop right here by the Mishnah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Freilichen.